Hi, and welcome to another episode of This Old Garden. Today, we're going to take a closer look at stems and how flowers turn into fruit. Today, we're going to get started by looking at the blueberry bushes. We looked at these a little bit in terms of stems last time, but I wanted to take a closer look at the blooms and the formation of berries today. We can see that there are flowers and clumps, and then if we move over here to this other bush, we can see that many of those blooms have started to fall off and are giving way to what is going to be the start of berries. Now, they're not berries yet, we can't eat them at this point, but they will start growing into berries that we'll be able to eat in about a month or so. If we take a closer look inside of the flowers, we can see the mechanisms that require pollination in order to start forming the berries. All right, if we take a closer look at the tulip and the blueberry flower here, we can see the pieces that are very important to pollination and then help to form either the seed or the berry, which surrounds the seeds as the plant continues to develop across the season. In the middle, you can see the pistil, and around the pistil you can see the stamen. Now, these are going to be the parts that are holding and receiving the pollen, so as bees and other insects fly around and touch the flowers, the pollen is spread from flower to flower and allows for the formation of seeds and fruit. If we take a look again at our tulips, we can see that they are in the last stages of bloom. The flowers are starting to fall apart. They're not closing back up in the evenings and then opening up in the mornings again. They're starting to fall apart, and as you can see them leaning over here on the stems, they're starting to fall over, which means that they are wrapping up their blooms for the season. This will be the end of the flowers, and now they're going to start storing up energy in their root systems throughout the bulbs so that they can come out again next year. All right, in this next section, we're going to take a look at an experiment here, and I'd like to start out by reminding you that you should never do experiments or use sharp objects like knives or scissors without adult supervision. So make sure that if you want to try this at home, you are getting an adult to help you out. Now, I set up this experiment by creating 2 glasses of water that have 2 different colors of food dye in them. Make sure that the food dye is mixed through the water really well. That way it's equally spread out and it's not overly saturated when you put the celery in. And then you put the stalk of celery in the water and let it sit for at least a few hours to be able to see it, but really overnight is probably best. Now, as we start to look at the time lapse of what happened during the experiment to get us to the point that we are starting today, you will notice that at first you can't see very much happening at all, except that the celery is starting to wilt a little bit and it just seems like it's going to fall over. And then very slowly you start to see just a little bit of tint start to work into the leaves. On the left you can start to see the blue coming in just a little bit more, and then the red starting to come in just a little bit stronger on the right hand side there. And in just a second here, you'll start to notice that you can see some pinpoints start to show up at the edge of the leaves where you can really see the dye is starting to settle. And now you're getting a much darker blue and red in each of the sets of leaves. You'll notice that for the most part, the celery has stopped wilting now and is just picking up more and more color. And this time lapse was completed over about 6 hours or so. Again, completely overnight will get you a little bit better color saturation, which you can see in the pictures that I'm going to put up right now. You can see where we ended up last night after the first video was done, and then again this morning after the celery had set overnight. So now we're going to take a quick look and compare the color of this fresh celery that has not been experimented on versus the celery that was in the blue and red dye cups. You can see that there's a pretty significant color difference, and that the blue dye has gone all the way up through the plant, and that the red dye has also gone all the way up through the plant. And you can see really strong deposits of those colors at the edges of the leaves. Now, how did that happen? How did the water get up into the leaves? Well, that's what we want to take a look at today. And so we are going to go ahead and take some cross sections of celery here, and we're going to try to take a closer look at how these cross sections look. Now, in order to do that, I have a handy dandy little microscope here that I can toss onto my cell phone camera. This is not some sort of really fancy piece of scientific equipment. This is actually from Five Below and does a pretty good job of letting us see close up on things. If you take a look at this, you can see what I see through the microscope there on my phone. And I'm going to zoom in here and get a couple pictures that I'll put up on the screen, hopefully, if I can get it to focus. We'll get a couple pictures of what's happening inside of the celery here. And we're going to talk a little bit more about these components once we take a look at how the dye pieces look. So we're going to go ahead and take the blue piece out. We're going to get a nice little cross section cut. And now we're going to take a look at the xylem and the phloem, which are going to help us understand how the water moved up and down with the color inside of the celery. Now, on the picture that's up on the screen now, you'll notice that there's a really dark little circle, and then there's a slightly lighter outer section toward the top of the picture. And those are going to be the xylem and the phloem. The xylem are the darker pieces and the phloem are the lighter pieces, and that is how water moves up and down through the stalk. That's how living plants are moving water and nutrients up and down, and we can see that the dye moved up and down along with the water to highlight those pieces here. So inside of every stem that we have, whether it's on the trees and the trunks that we were looking at, or the different flowers that we've looked at, any of the plants that we've looked at so far are transporting water and nutrients through themselves using these little tubes that run from roots all the way out to the leaves. And we can see that really, really clearly right here with how the color has been transported out from the very bottom of the plant all the way up to the very tippy top of each little leaf. Welcome back to my kitchen, where we're going to talk about things that we can eat related to this week's topic. To start with, we're going to go back to a food that we talk about in seeds because it's also a fruit that we get from a plant flower, and that's going to be tomatoes. Tomatoes grow on a tomato plant after it blossoms, gets pollinated, and then the blossom forms into a fruit that grows across the summer. A similar type of fruit is going to be the tomatillo, which is used to make salsa verde. It looks very much like a tomato, but it stays green and has a husk on the outside that you take off before consuming. Another kind of closely, visually close plant would be the pepper, which we have in hot sauces. Most of this is just water and pepper in here. The pepper, again, comes from a flower that grows on the plant. We also have cranberries. Cranberries grow on vine type of plants that grow in bog, which means that they are partially grown in water, and the plant flowers and grows the berries. Pepper. Pepper is another food that we eat that comes from a flowering vine. The fruits are going to look like this when they are dried up, and then you can put them in a grinder and get them nice and ground up on your food for added spice and flavor. Avocados are very popular fruits. They come from a tree, the tree flowers, and then pollinators will pollinate the flowers, and a few weeks later you get fruits. And then last but not least, we have apples. Now on the apple here, you can actually see the stem where it was attached to the tree. And then on the other side, you can see the bit that used to be the flower before it grew into the fruit. Now remember, most of the time, the purpose of the fruit is to protect and feed the seed to make new plants. But over time, humans have figured out what we can take off of the plants and enjoy for ourselves. That's delicious. Let's go check on the plants that we've been watching over the last few weeks. Just a quick update on the daylilies. You can see that they are continuing to grow, getting taller, but not putting up their flower shoots yet.
Quick update on the hostas. This is the bunch that was originally very pale and white that I had left under a tarp accidentally. And then there's the same variety over here, and you can see that the green on both batches are really starting to match up, and that this is recovering nicely, now stretching out toward the sun and absorbing all that nice sunlight underneath of the deck here, because hostas don't particularly like direct sunlight a lot of times, but it's perfectly happy here in a shadier environment and recovering very nicely after being uncovered and allowed to breathe a little bit earlier this season. Here we'll take a very quick look at the tiny dino Asiatic lilies that we looked at last time. They are much, much bigger. Put my hand in the frame here to kind of give you some perspective from the last video. They're getting a whole lot bigger, and they are way bigger than last year. So I'm actually really excited to see how big these get this year, because they are way, way larger than what I had previously. And they were really big and beautiful last year, so that's kind of an exciting development to see just how much bigger and more beautiful they will be this year. Just going to take a quick look at our petunias and our basil here for an update. These are starting to look a lot more mature down here, and up here we can see more mature plants shaping up there. And then the basil plants are coming right along, and you can really start to see that the leaves are differently shaped on the basil than the petunias. The larger petunias are doing pretty well, and some of them are actually starting to put out some beginnings of buds. So we should know what color these are, because I got them all mixed up in the cups pretty soon. And then it will be about time to put them in the ground in about a week or so. Coming back to the irises for just a minute, you can see that they have wrapped up their blooms for the most part. We have one little bloom outstanding down there, and then one that is just about to open, but for the most part they are wrapping up, and that will be it for the season for them. They'll be storing up energy to expand their rhizomes and bulbs next year and grow probably a few more clumps of plants than what we saw this year. These are the grasses that we saw just starting to poke out of the base of their stalks from last year, and you can see that the blades are really pushing out nicely now. You can see a lot more green to them, and you can see that they are extending their growth, which means that they are having to push nutrients and water all up and down these stems. If we take a quick look at our stone crop here that we planted, you can see that not only has it established, but it's really started to grow, with some of the pieces of plant really pushing up out of the ground now. Now this is an update that I'm pretty excited about. The bananas have continued to grow, and as you can see, have started to put out new leaves again. Now, since we aren't expecting any freezes, I don't anticipate that these will have any reason to get burned and start to drop back like we saw before. So all of these are going to be coming out into full-fledged leaves here very soon. We'll keep watching them and have an update next time that I think will probably show us some full-on open leaves. Here's a second banana update where we can see that my lone banana at the corner of my deck here is pushing up strongly and really making an effort to start pushing a leaf out of the top, which I think we'll be able to see more next time. Thanks for joining me on This Old Garden. Join me again next time when we'll be talking about pollinators and checking in on the progress of our plants. Say goodbye, Ella.